Now, the government is set to release its Religious Freedoms Bill in the next sitting fortnight. This was a promise, you may recall, made by Malcolm Turnbull as part of his push to change the definition of marriage. Well, like in so many other areas of leadership, he actually promised a lot and delivered very little. Still, it's been nearly 3 years since he was tossed out as PM, and the coalition government are on the cusp of introducing this legislation, apparently to protect religious freedoms. Now, religious freedom is a cornerstone of a democratic society. Freedom of religion is even part of our constitution, where section 116 states, and I quote, "The Commonwealth shall not make any law for establishing any religion or for imposing any religious observance or for prohibiting the free exercise of any religion, and no religious test shall be required as a qualification for any office or public trust under the Commonwealth." Okay, now that seems pretty clear, to me at least. We have freedom to practice our faith within the bounds of the law. So why do we suddenly need to protect that freedom through legislation? And what are actually the implications of trying to codify a freedom that we've always presumed we've had? Well, that's the subject of tonight's Talking Points memo, and I'm delighted to say here to discuss it with me is Caleb Bond. Caleb, thanks for joining me tonight. I want to kick it off with this, right? We've got to talk about Australian history. Number one, it's long been a hallmark of Australian society that our people are free to practice their religious belief in accordance with the law. And now, no matter how strange those beliefs may be to others. So my question to you is, why do we suddenly need to protect this freedom of religion through legislation?
Well, the short answer is we don't. This was a red herring that was thrown out there by Malcolm Turnbull, as you say, as part of the same-sex marriage plebiscite deal. And I think he actually has hoodwinked a lot of conservatives and religious people in Australia in making them believe, and the coalition has continued this, making them believe that codifying religious freedom in law would actually result in better religious freedom. The problem with codifying any freedom or right in law, be it religious or otherwise, is that you always have the problem where one person's rights will have to trump another person's rights. And so if you start putting them in law, you basically have to make a decision as to whether one person has more rights than another. The system we have at the moment, which is under the Constitution, that religious freedom in most forms is protected, works perfectly fine. And I fear that if we go down the road of creating laws that otherwise enshrine religious freedom, you could actually end up in a position where religion and practice of religion could be less free than it is currently.
That's exactly right. And that takes me to talking point number 2 here. Organisations and businesses deliberately go out to develop a culture, and that relates to their services, their conduct of their employees, their expectations of everyone that they engage with. And religious and non-religious organisations, be they schools or hospitals, are no different in this regard. So again, the question comes, surely if a business can create the culture about what they expect of their employees and the behavioural standards and the attitude, surely they can say, well, we want to make those decisions for ourselves. We don't mean the government to tell us that we can do, because we know what we want, we know what our customers want, we know what we want from our employees. Is that too much to expect?
No. And as you say, this is a situation where interference from the government can actually make us less free. I mean, nothing is inherently illegal. Everything is automatically legal until there is a law that says otherwise. And so when you start applying and creating laws to something where there is not currently a law, you are naturally going to restrict that more than it was before. And one of the most contentious parts of this bill is the suggestion of a Folau clause, which of course is in relation to Israel Folau, who was punted from playing rugby for his country because of views he has expressed on social media, religious views. But the problem with that is that it is meant to protect the ability for someone to express something they believe. Now, you could end up in a situation where someone starts working for a Christian organisation and then they start publicly espousing views that Christianity is a sham and that Christianity should be banned in Australia, for instance. And under this Israel Folau clause, their employer, their Christian employer, would not be able to do anything about it because their ability to speak their beliefs publicly is enshrined in law. Now, tell me how that is a situation where religious freedom has actually been protected as opposed to trodden upon.